after lunch. I know that this is the most difficult time of the day to actually have a panel discussion, but we are here and we will have a panel discussion and hopefully a Q&A session at the very end, because I believe that this is one of the most important topics, not only of the day, but of the season. And I'm not talking about the Christmas season, by the way, or anything related to the winter holidays. That is, how do we get the reconstruction going? And where do we get the money to get the reconstruction plan and process going? So we have a sort of an outline for a project. And I am here with some distinguished guests that are each and every one focusing on the sources for finances, but from different angles. So I would like to start with actually the gentleman on my right, which is coming from Ukraine, Mr. Roman MAYDANYK, who's also a professor at civil law at Taras Shevchenko National University in Kyiv. And I would like to start with a broad question, which is, where do you think we will have to face the major hurdles? And where do you think the major sources would come together with the hurdles or separate? So your thoughts on financing the reconstruction project. Thank you.
Dear moderator, dear colleagues, thank you very much for this opportunity to tell. It's my attempt. No, you. Dear colleagues, I'm grateful to you to this opportunity to have exchange of our thoughts, to hear you. I think that for us, currently, if we talk about the source of funding, first of all, we have urgently need to positively get solution of the destiny of the assets, Russian assets, which are under the sanction. Because we understand, on the one hand, that this issue is complicated, but we understand that such level of the violation of international law from the state aggressor, we have only one result. We could have only one result in that context. US, EU, they try to find substantially new approach, and we hope that we'll get positive result. I say about the confiscation of assets, and I understand that we need to use new approach, but it is not only the issue of the political will. We should be ready to propose effective legal rules, first of all. In that context, I think we have some proposal for that, and I think together we will have positive result. Thank you.
Okay, legal rules for moving forward into deciding where to get the money for reconstruction. The professor basically opened up a big question for the West, which has to do with how do we deal with Russian assets, frozen assets due to the sanctions. and how do we discuss the major question of financing related to that. So I have with me visiting fellow at the Allison Center for Foreign Policy at the Heritage Foundation, Mr. Thomas Dance. With that in mind, how do you comment on the major hurdles and sources? So the sources and the hurdles attached to get financing for the reconstruction project. Given everything that is going on, also, I might say, at the US level at the moment when we are rediscussing, well, not rediscussing, but discussing how to support Ukraine. So.
Okay. Well, thank you. It's a delight to be with you all, the group that is here after lunch. Thank you. I'll jump in and answer that question, but maybe just for everyone's benefit to step back. Obviously, we know when we're talking about financing the reconstruction of Ukraine, we're a little bit moving into the realm of the hypothetical, not because we won't be doing it at some point, but only because we don't know what that starting point will be and what the task ahead will exactly look like. We know what the rough parameters are at this point, but they continue to evolve, right? So a lot of people have heard World Bank, kind of a headline number of about 411 billion. That's a top line number. I think it's important because my own background, I should mention too. So I am an investor, a private equity investor. I've spent 30 years working in the region in Russia, Georgia, Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Ukraine, we had businesses, Moldova, we had businesses. So after that, going to the Trump administration, where I was at Treasury in international affairs, and then finally, I'm back in the working world. So, and I help Heritage Foundation on establishing what would be a conservative approach to Ukraine reconstruction. As a numbers guy, whenever I see a report and a big number, I want to know how we got there. I want to dig into a little bit. So the 411, obviously it's moved since that number came out earlier this year, but I think it's important to recognize that a lot of it is both tied to geographical areas, but it's also, so of course, the most of it being tied to where the fighting has occurred naturally since the war. And that's a good portion of that is still in Russian-controlled territories. So if our assumption is that we're pushing Russia back to the 1991 borders, it's a much bigger task, right? If we're not, then we're talking about a much longer task, because I think everybody has in mind that is the ultimate objective here. That 411 billion, and it's in the report, and it's broken down, it's broken into different categories, both regionally but also by sectors. It includes direct damages, a concept called losses, and then a third top number, which they're calling needs. Losses are something which may be more difficult to address, because these are kind of foregone revenues, they're higher costs, they're economic damages, so to speak. But as an investor coming in now, where we're taking the next dollar out of our pocket, that's our starting point, right? So we're not necessarily looking to make people whole or the country whole on what's happened in the past. So consequently, I think the numbers are less that we put out there. Now they could be multiple times more. We don't, unfortunately, the data is what it is in terms of a lot of it's been gathered quickly, what people were able to assess given the fighting, et cetera. And a big part of it will therefore be an assessment as soon as it's peaceable, right? So coming back to the question, okay, what's our source of funds? Where does this come from? I think the key part from our point of view is that the major investors should be the private sector, and it should be European and US businesses, other businesses around the world, and importantly, Ukrainians as well, right? This is their country ultimately, and everybody needs to be rowing in the same direction in terms of what's put to work there. I think the idea of seizing assets, central bank reserves, I'm more skeptical, to be fair with you. I think there's problems around that, especially because of our approach to the war and our rationale about a rules-based order. I think that the sanctity of contracts needs to be respected. I think that there are derivative issues that begs the question of, and so I would tread lightly on that. I think that the capital is in the pockets of the private sector and the governments who have a vested interest in this to step forward. So I'd be focusing on them. I think we'll get we'll get a punitive settlement or arrangement with Russia at some point, but I think the two have to be disaggregated. I would not want people to channel all of their energies on using the seized assets as a source of funds.
Thank you for that. Okay, it's working. Thank you for that answer. And you highlighted several points beside answering to the major question related to assets. You basically highlighted the problems that we are having with addressing exactly what we are funding, the project that we are funding, which is key to the question of financing. Now, with regards to getting private capital in, because this is basically one key concept, even if the governments are going to support the effort, you basically need firms to come in and reconstruct. So if we are talking about private capital, now I'm going to turn to my right again and invite our colleague Marcin Kruszczyl, Director of the Government Plenipotentiary Office for Polish-Ukrainian Development Cooperation, with a question related to how do we support investors. I know that you are also focusing on this in your daily job, so therefore tell us on the challenges that you are looking at when you are talking to investors and the challenges that you are finding from the investors that are interested in getting into Ukraine to help the reconstruction. Thank you.
Okay, it works. Welcome everyone. Maybe a short, quick disclaimer, because I'm the director of the Government Plenipotentiary Office for Polish-Ukrainian Development Cooperation. At the moment, we don't have the plenipotentiary, as yesterday there was a change of power and the new government was appointed in Poland. However, our office provides this continuity, and we hope that the new plenipotentiary will be appointed very soon. So we will be able to continue our work. But indeed, our office was established in June. So we had already 6 months to put in place a special mechanism for business community, especially in Poland, to attract private sector to get involved in the recovery and reconstruction of Ukraine. And what is important to mention is that we don't see the process of the recovery and reconstruction as something that will come in future. We believe that this process has already started, and the recovery, especially also in those parts that have not been destroyed so much by the war, that this process is already going on, and it also includes the modernization of Ukraine. So we try to attract private sector, Polish but also foreign business to start investing in Ukraine and also do trade with our Ukrainian partners. At the moment, there are still 600 Polish companies, Polish companies with Polish capital, and that are operating on the Ukrainian market. So they are still, functioning pretty well if you take into account the war situation. And so we also provide support for those businesses that are on the Ukrainian market, and we try to attract the others. And here, what are the crucial instruments that we have provided? So first of all, the first request from the business side when we started our mission was to provide de-risking mechanism. So to provide them the insurance scheme, insurance mechanism that will also, function in a situation of war. And this was the first challenge because private insurance companies, they are not ready to give this kind of guarantees if you want to invest in a country when there is a war. So we had to make some amendments to the law on the Polish Export Credit Agency. It's called KUKE. So the agency could start providing insurance and also financial guarantees for those companies who are willing to invest and do trade in Ukraine. And we succeeded at the beginning of September. The president signed the law. The law came into power on the end of September. So now Polish companies, but also foreign companies that are ready to provide some local content, so also that are ready to work with Polish companies, they can apply for this insurance from the Polish Export Credit Agency, and this insurance and those guarantees are also provided from the state budget. So this is not a commercial situation. It is a situation when the state is providing this kind of guarantee because we believe that this is also in our national interest. So this is also this kind of example when the public and private institutions can work together in order to attract business in Ukraine and also support in this matter the Ukrainian economy. As we believe that the reconstruction process or the recovery and modernization of Ukraine cannot take place without the private sector, because the public money will not do the job. You can pump into the system a lot of public money, but there must be some kind of also the element of competitiveness, the element of business approach. So that's why we created those mechanisms. We also reopened the office of the Polish Investment and Trade Agency directly in Kyiv. So there is a team of, at the moment, 3 consultants who are ready to support Polish business in searching partners on the Ukrainian side, also explaining how the Ukrainian legal and economic system works, because this kind of support is also very important to have all the information regarding, for example, the procurement processes, regarding the procurement law in Ukraine in one place. So we call it one-stop shop approach, that the entrepreneur go to one place and he can get all the information he needs, how to establish business in Ukraine, how to find partners, how to take part in the public procurement tenders. So this was also, let's say, the second aspect of our work. And we also prepared, together with the Polish Public Procurement Office, a special guidebook for entrepreneurs, how the public procurement system works in Ukraine. So it's in Polish, so Polish business can, gain this knowledge. And here we also support our experts, also from the Public Procurement Office, to work with their Ukrainian counterparts in order, for example, to reform the public procurement system in Ukraine, because it is still very complicated. There are many requirements in it. So a lot of business people, when they are asked to try to take part in some procurement system, they said, no, it's too complicated, it's too time consuming, there is also the issue of corruption. So they are very much afraid. So we tried to break their concerns. And here maybe a last thought. Sometimes they are even more afraid about the non-transparency of the system or the complexity of the system, rather than the potential military damage or military threat, especially in the western part of Ukraine. So here we were also quite surprised by this, let's say, approach of Polish business, that the war is not the main problem, especially if you want to invest in the Western Ukraine. There are other issues. Of course, they are also, it's all connected, yes, but still there is a lot of room for improvements if you want to attract also private sector to Ukraine. Thank you.
Thank you. Considering that the private sector is, again, the key element in our equation for financing the reconstruction. And again, there was a difference between the regions, a difference between how we regard the process when we are looking at the Western Ukraine versus the rest of Ukraine, war risk versus non-war risk. I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Burcin ATAKAN. He is a Deloitte partner, forensic services leader in Central Europe. And I believe that you have more to do with the private sector than anyone else on this panel, maybe, at least in this region. So what is your take on the challenges for financing the reconstruction project, and how do you see the differences that were highlighted earlier by the fellow panelists?
Thank you. I would like to start with trying my Ukrainian first, if you don't mind.
Please.
Dear colleagues, dear audience, thank you for your participation in the conference in these difficult times, and we pray for Ukrainian people, and we wish you all the best.
And I'm supporting professionally both states, government institutions, and the private institutions. I'm trying to, when we say forensic, sometimes forensic may be misunderstood. My line of profession is about helping the companies and the institutions to fight against corruption, anti-bribery, and to perform the fraud investigations. So I can see, last week I was in a meeting in the accession of EU, how Ukraine is addressing the corruption issues. So this roundtable was very fruitful for me to understand and bring some perspective into this room. What I understand that Ukraine is taking a lot of actions, legislative-wise, to address the corruption. Only on Friday last week, there were like 3 new laws and some amendments passed the parliament. And those are, I'm talking about, I'm giving a reference, I'm quoting from a parliamentary of EU who is who has an active role in the accession of EU. He said that some of the laws are even beyond what EU has. So those are great laws. But the challenge is these are new laws, and the laws are on the paper until they are implemented, until they are enforced. So the new challenge for Ukraine is to implement those laws and bring into the life. That's where the real journey will start. I can say it's a tough times for Ukraine, and even though I can see a lot of energy on doing the right things, I can see the country is working as a whole and try to do their best, because there are several challenges beside the war. One of them is like accession to EU. This war will end sooner or later. Then the challenge will remain how to access the EU and how to be a member of NATO, considering the geopolitical challenges of Ukraine. Actually, I would like to bring some perspectives. I was referring to some laws that passed Ukraine parliament last week. One of the laws, there is a very strong institution and getting more stronger, which is the National Anti-Corruption Bureau of Ukraine. And this has like 300 people already onboarded, and now they would like to enlarge their force with the new law to 1,000 people. It's a huge force. I have to say the same institution, similar institution in Romania did a lot of improvements in the business landscape and the government and the landscape of Romania. And I can see the same energy. I also listen Mr. Novakov, who is the head of this institution, and I can say that he's very much committed. His word was, we have zero tolerance to corruption, which is very important. There are some also amendments in the law of the prevention of corruption, and also they also amended the law of the criminal code. I don't want to make like very detailed explanation, since we have a law professor here. I don't want to be rude over there. But I can say that Mr. Wolfgang Nozar of European Parliament stated that the policy-making process in UK is clearly admirable, and he says also the enforcement of the laws remain as a challenge. When we say implementation, I would like to take you back to the history a bit. Since my American colleague sitting next to me, I would like to talk about a law which has passed the US Senate back in 1977, FCPA, or how do we know, Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. So this law is like very basic, one pager. It's like 2 requirements. As an American citizen or as an American company, if you are going and doing business in abroad, 1, keep your records healthy in a robust way. And 2 is, don't bribe the foreign officials to make business. Very easy. Back in 77, up until maybe 80s, there were a couple of instances where the sanctions, where very smaller sanctions was issued. Then the law, the act was dormant up until 1990s. where the law is still again remembered and then put into act, enforcement. And since then, 1990s, the business landscape changed. Not in US, in all across the globe. How? Because the state is enforced. They said that we are not accepting dirty business. Make your business in a form that we can be proud of. That was the main message. And in the early 2000s, there was a secondary legislation which was explaining the law came up, and many companies, even today very much respected companies, receive huge sanctions, up to $1 billion US. So that changed the business landscape. So when we are still talking about dormant law versus enforced law, we are talking about this difference. So sometimes it would take, even for US, to take the laws into the action. I would like to again quote from another writer, Daron Acemoğlu, who is a professor at the university, in a university in US. He wrote a book about why nations fail. And he was, am I speaking too much? No. Okay.
You should basically have the microphone closer to your mouth.
Sure, sorry.
Okay.
So Daron Acemoğlu was talking about why the nations fail, what was the issue. And he's talking about the countries who has not independent institutions more tend to fail. And when we are looking at, indeed, when we are looking at the institutions in different countries, developed countries versus emerging countries, we can say that developed countries able to maintain, to a certain extent, the independence of the institutions, and that is very important. So I'm coming back to the Ukraine. So if we are talking about robustness of the business landscape, we have to have independent institutions all over the place. I would like to pause here because I talk too much. I feel like I talk too much. Maybe we can continue later. Thank you very much.
It's a perfect sentence to end with, because I sense there is a sort of a challenge in the question to our law professor. So, do you have anything to comment on the law aspect, the legislative aspect of financing? What are the challenges there and the opportunities? Because this is core, no matter how we look at the project of reconstruction.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, moderator, for your comments. I think that I said about the most relevant for us, for Ukrainian issue, related to the sources of financing. But I think that we hope that maybe the world is ready to propose provisions about the war aggression delict. I mean the situation when we will get understandable, clear provisions about the tortious liability for such type of damages. Because without the clear answer in these issues, we don't get understandable result. Therefore, of course, we hope that the problems related to the immunity of state, the problems regarding the assessment of the losses, they are very relevant, but we hope that like a set of these relevant issues, we could have positive result. And the second one, it's more systemic, not problem, but the issue is related to the model of the recovery. We know that world practice has some types classification of the possible models. For example, when we talk about maybe about the investment model, maybe about the models which is based on the some another criteria. On my mind, I've heard from my colleague as well that we have take into consideration the peculiarities of our situation. First of all, we have permanent threat of the war from our enemy, from our neighbor, from Russia. And therefore, I think that, Marshall, you are correct that regarding the, in some extent, close to the source of the threat, maybe it's correct to divide our regions on some regions in the sphere, on the shape of the risiko. Therefore, we have some idea in that context. Maybe we could divide our regions, for example, like a front line, center part, or rear, regarding the shape of the risiko. And another issue is related to the conceptual issue. I think that we understand that except for the sources of financing, we have a set of relevant issues. I mean, the fight with corruption, I mean the issues of the recognition of property rights and enforcement, contractual rights. We have to clear understanding of the condition for our foreigner, for example, foreigner investor. Therefore, maybe we should talk about the conditionally values-based model, because this approach more close to our situation related. And in that context, we understand that we know our lessons. I mean, we have to complete our constitutional reform. We have to get results related to the some guarantees for the investors. And in that context, we understand that maybe we have to create some special funding which will take into consideration such tasks. Therefore, maybe it could be like creation of the trust fund related to the performance of such sectoral problems. And for example, in the previous our panels, I've heard about the problem of the more effective legal forms of cooperation, or for example, with the participation of our investors. For example, we have a problem with the effectiveness of the PPP, I mean private-public partnership. Maybe we could try to propose to our investors another effective legal forms, I mean creation of some sectoral trust. For us is relevant the issue how to effectively use the assets which we'll get from as a result of the maybe expropriation, I mean maybe taken from another sources of assets. And therefore, I think that systemic approach is not less relevant issue when we talk about the planned or results which we'd like to get. Thank you.
Okay, so my understanding here is that talking about systemic approach, we are pretty much building that, and we are pretty much building the legal aspect of the reconstruction project in Ukraine. There is much to be built and there is much to be reinforced. Is that what you're saying, Professor?
Yes, in some sense you are right. I mean that we have to take into consideration that we cannot to propose a unified approach for any situation,
Right.
because regarding the peculiarities of the sectors, and for example, of some economy, maybe if we talk about the updating of, for example, institutional approach regarding the fighting about the corruption and so on, we cannot use the same situation, the same approach. Therefore, it depends on the peculiarity of the purposes.
Okay. It depends on the peculiarity of the particular elements that we are looking at, therefore. So with that in mind, I'd like to open the floor to the audience. I do have more questions, but don't let me ask all the questions, because this is likely an important topic for the audience in the business field. Please do say what institution you are or company you are representing. Do we have a mic for? Yep. Oh.
Я Володимир Хеменець, професор Національного інституту.
Volodymyr Hemenets. I'm the professor for National Institute for Strategic Research. Volodymyr Hemenets, professor of National Institute for Strategic Research. First of all, I'd like to thank you for a very interesting discussion, and I would like to tell that really our institution, Analytical Center, it is the biggest analytical center in the state, which serves the President's office and Security Council. We really approach the process of reconstruction and rebuilding as territorially oriented mechanisms, what was already mentioned by our colleagues from Kyiv and from Poland. Yes, mostly now, currently, business is being reconstructed on the safer territory. We had experience when in 2017 we invested into business in Mariupol, Lysychansk, Donetsk, and Kramatorsk. And what about the consequences we have today? We realize that Russia as a state will not disappear. But if before our economy was developing in the east of the country because the enemy was in the west, but now the situation changes drastically because all our industries are relocated from east to west, and the process of reconstruction will gradually be moving from west to east. And together with a labor market, we are going to leave living facilities and other institutions because it will make no sense to rebuild, reconstruct for several times one and the same institution, for example, a hospital in the east of Ukraine. So we would like to propose a strategy that we will have to start rebuilding from western and central parts of the country, and it will cover not only social objects but business objects as well. And also, we have to raise the issue who will be conducting this reconstruction. In Chernovtsi, researchers say that we lack 5 million specialists to conduct rebuilding and reconstruction. So are there real mechanisms for to make our people return back to Ukraine, or we should develop a state strategy. And if you have thoughts, on this account, on this issue, it would be interesting to listen. How should we invite labor force or return our people back to Ukraine? Could you share your thoughts with us?
Particular, so I will invite Professor, if you want to take that one as a representative of the Ukrainian state, but also the rest of the panelists. Maybe you have thoughts as well.
Thank you very much, my Ukrainian colleague. Thank you very much for your question. Regarding the lack of the resources, labor resources, I'm not sure that we could find in history the clear answer to our situation, because in some amount, some peculiarities, maybe almost we have a unique situation. But I think that we try to understand that people come back to Ukraine if they have some minimum standard of living style. And therefore, first task for us to understand which element segments of this minimum standard for the people we should like to come back. It should be not only salary. I understand that first of all, it's conditions for the safety in the broad understanding, not for the worker, but first of all for family. And yeah, and another question that for family, for workers, is very important the feeling of the perspective, positive perspective. It's enough complicated feeling or question, because it's on the one hand it's like a traditional approach to get the success as a professional, but maybe much more important for the worker to have a future success for the members of the family. I mean, good education, good environment for the relatives, maybe and other persons. And therefore, for us, it's very important to understand what does it mean, safety lifestyle, because for us it's an unusual task. And another question that we have experience of the similar armed conflict. I talk about the previous Yugoslavia, and I know that it's very conservative sphere, because if we could premise, could give some normal conditions for in Ukraine, we could be ready that it would be good result if we'll get half of our peoples, I mean families which will come back to Ukraine, because I know that country for example, in Serbia, related to that, they don't get enough success in that context. And therefore, it is one of the substantial reasons why such regions are not very successful. And therefore, I think that first of all, we have to, I think, to start from the understanding about so-called standards, which we could propose to our Ukrainian. And regarding the dividing of the region for the management, for the control and the risk, I think generally it's a good approach, but it is conditionally approach because it's our understanding of it only on today's approach. Yeah, yeah, and but maybe it would be good if we'll have a plan B in that context because it should be, I think, flexible understanding in that context because it is not easy to solve problem to relocate some plants. We have not to think that it is solution of the problem because we understand that traditions of some producing are creating not during 1 year. For that we have to take much more time, maybe decades of that. Thank you.
Okay, Tom?
Can you hear me okay? Thank you for that question. And I can feel the passion in your voice there expressing it. I would just offer a few thoughts, and they may not be popular, but I think you have to set expectations and realize that this reconstruction is going to be a process. So it's not going to happen a year or 2 or 5. We're talking about a multi-decadal process here for rebuilding Ukraine. Human capital, people are it. It's your greatest asset. And I think that's what you need to steward very carefully. Steward meaning to recognize and take care and promote and develop and of course, importantly, attract back, right? So as my colleague here pointed out, the first consideration has to be safety for them. They left for a reason. Primarily that was for safety. Maybe some left because they didn't agree with the war or they didn't want to be part of it, right? But some of those you may want back too. So there has to be an ability for them to come back and feel safe from their own government, right? So you have to make peace with all the Ukrainians who are outside the country, as well as the people who left unwillingly, able to come back knowing that their families, most importantly, will be safe, right? So second big thing is naturally exploring human needs here, a roof over your head, right? So I think if you wanted to attract people back to Ukraine, providing that quickly and providing that as an inducement, as kind of an attraction, as a qualifying for them to come back would be really helpful. Example, Kyiv, right? That's one of the areas that's had the most destruction of its housing block, right? So that's a big city. And as I was saying before, you have to prioritize. I think rather than going west to east as a strategy for rebuilding, you might think about the big cities, the major cities. I think you're going to have to focus on big spots and building. You can't be everywhere at once. So I would think about like an all-out effort to build housing stock in these major cities that are important economic drivers, and then build clusters around that. as you rightly pointed out, some of these industries, unfortunately, may not be coming back, right? They just, even if they're still under Russian control, God willing, they're freed from it, but you'd have to give a hard look at them, whether you were going to build back, because their legacy from a Soviet era, they struggled even for the last 30 years. It's part of the reason they didn't attract international investment before everything kind of came to where it passed. So that needs to be recognized too, but they also have communities. People built their lives in these towns, right? So they're not so enthused to maybe move across the country to have a chance at a new life, right? They really want to find a life in their cities. So that's a difficult, and I'm afraid there's no easy answer or solution for that. But I do think subsidizing housing is a big issue. I think that's where donors could be doing a lot in terms of building it. I think investors will be incented to get in there and provide that housing. The private sector can do it faster and better than any government-directed operation. I mean, part of the problem with the housing stock is it's old, right? Too, a lot of it is these Khrushchevka from like that the Soviets built. So it was in need of replacement in any regard. There's some opportunity here in terms of improving things as you build back. So that would be my thoughts on that.
Sure. I will be fast. I will speak with the numbers. I just check how much population Ukraine lost after the war. It says 8 million, if I'm correct, which stands even more. So it stands for 20% of the population of Ukraine. I'm going to give another statistics. In Romania, the population used to be 23 million before, in 2007, when Romania joined EU. And gradually, within a couple of years, population decreased to 18.5 million, and which is almost an equal rate of 20%. What was the consequences for Romania, and what happened afterwards? Of course, people in Romania not went out of Romania because of a traumatic event, but they take the opportunity to go to EU and work there as a foreign worker. Poland has the similar situation actually. And people, maybe half of the people, maybe like slightly less than half of the people repatriated back their countries. I remember a quote from Ursula K. Le Guin, who's a writer, a science fiction novelist. She's saying that true journey starts at return. So which means that I guess we have to find out attractions, employments, and opportunities for the people that will repatriate back to Ukraine. This will happen sooner or later. My colleagues truly, put the conditions. What will be them? The first thing is, I guess, the security is the biggest concern. Then I believe people will come back to their countries. Thank you.
Yes, just a short comment. So, of course, apart from security issues, for sure, the perspective of a good job, this is very important. And here, again, we see the crucial role of the private sector. So you must attract more business to Ukraine, and then this business will attract, and this new job positions will attract people, also Ukrainians, to come back to Ukraine. But in terms of these short-term solutions, I think there is a very good example of the mayor of Mariupol, if I'm not mistaken, Vadim Boychenko. Of course, Mariupol is occupied by the Russians and heavily destroyed. And I think that the 70 or 50% of the population of this city, migrated to the Western Ukraine, but also to other countries. But the mayor still, keeps contact with his citizens, with his inhabitants of his city. So he's organizing some special zones in other Ukrainian cities, but also in Western and Central European countries. So those people, they still have this kind of link with their small communities, and I think this is very important, that they still have contact from their mayor, who is also operating from outside the occupied territories. So I think this is also very important, and when the war will be over, those people will still have this kind of feeling that, okay, they are a community of one city, and they will be more able to come back and again create the local economy, social life, and so on and so on. So I think this is a very good example to follow in Ukraine, at least. Thank you.
I propose to... we only have 5 minutes. If it's really small, under 30 seconds, please do.
Thank you. Sorry, I think it's important for Ukraine. Maybe it's a peculiarity of Ukrainian situation in that context. We have to complete our reform regarding the municipality. In that context, for us, it's important to be understandable in the standard of the EU. I mean, about the legal status of the municipality as a legal entity of public law, because just now we don't have such status, and we have a collaboration with our EU colleagues. For EU, it's a normal situation when each city, maybe another type of the communality has this status, because we don't have such a clear situation. In that context, it's our lesson, I think so.
Okay. Are there any other questions in the audience? Because we do have some minutes that I'd like to spend wisely if there are some questions. Bogdan?
Yeah, hi. My name is Bogdan Bernaga from the New Strategy Center. But I'll ask the question it's like in the context of somebody who's coming from the private sector. So this is about the financing of the reconstruction of Ukraine. Now in financing, I got the sources of funds and I got the uses of funds. Clearly, everybody is of the opinion there will be sources of funds as long as the uses of funds, the projects are spent wisely. And I think the answer to spending stuff wisely is to have clear, simple and transparent rules, whether it's for public procurement or in general procurement. I don't think the answer is to hire thousands of employees to fight corruption. I mean, state-owned employees, state employees, they're not productive. If you have simple, transparent procurement rules, then it will be much simpler to enforce efficient, construction projects, whether it's industrial projects, whether it's building stock, whether it's roads and stuff like that. So I reckon the focus needs to be on these simplifying the procurement rules rather than hiring, 1,000+ anti-corruption employees. And I guess my thinking is colored from my Romanian experience. So.
You don't have a question?
No, it was just a comment, sorry.
Okay. Any other with a question? Okay, if not, do we have a comment to a comment?
I have a comment on comment. Bogdan, thank you very much.
Okay. Final comment on comment, please.
Thank you very much, Bogdan, for this comment. Actually, you have a point. If we want to do the things, it should be simple, understandable, easy, not very complex. I guess this was the reflection from the Ukrainian side as well. But on the other hand, it doesn't mean that we lose the control of the procedures. If we are looking at the Romanian experience, we have this public procurement system which is working very nicely, and there are controls over there. There are not thousands of controllers, but there are strict rules, and the legislation is very, very, very concise. I believe one thing Ukraine is doing very well is the IT sector. And I'm sure that they are capable of developing and implementing an effective public procurement system which is supported with the relevant legislation. Very good comment. Thank you very much.
So first of all, can I have to disagree with Bogdan, yes, if I'm correct, with your statement that all public employees are unproductive. So, as a civil servant,
yes, we disagree.
There are some employees of the state who are productive. Of course, the incentives are different, and they are not always, economic. So this is the first issue. But I totally agree with you regarding this simplification of law, of regulations, and this is also what a lot of entrepreneurs, business people were telling us why they are not so ready to enter the Ukrainian market, because the regulations are too complex. You have to provide almost all the documentation in Ukrainian language. There are many, steps, and you wait for many decisions on the way after you got some, final confirmation. However, the Ukrainians are doing pretty well with the digitalization, and I think that this is some kind of good approach that they try to digitalize, but hopefully it will also involve the simplification of the system, because even if there is a very good digital system, like human, let's say, invention can always find some way how to make it, corruptive or non-transparent, and use some kind of, drawbacks. So here I think also that there must be some control, especially at the earlier or the early stage of the transformation of the system, because it's very difficult to change, the mentality of people who are treating, corruption practices as something more or less usual, and I think that many countries from our region also experience this transformation. So I think that at the beginning there must be some corruption and work from the state, basically. Thank you, Bogdan.
Okay, well, we have gone a bit over the time, several minutes, but of course that will not stop me for concluding the panel. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for being here and discussing this very important issue. I will say that the main takeaway in a phrase is that we do not necessarily know what exactly we are financing, but we do know that the number one source for financing will be private capital, and somehow we need to support private capital into Ukraine. At the same time, the big question marks are, what do we do with human capital? How do we solve the larger problem and the toughest problem of Ukraine? And number two, legal framework. How do we build the legal framework and the institutional framework to sustain the investment that will come in when will come in? Thank you very much again, everyone, for being here, and The next session is actually about the Black Sea strategy, where I invite you all. I am not going to be the moderator, but I will speak. Thank you.